Welcome to this week's episode of Founders and Funders Australia. This week I have Drew from Huddled. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Ray. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great. So tell me a little bit about what Huddled does, and then we'll dive into your story.
Yeah, for sure. So Huddled is essentially, you can think of it as an AI-powered Slack for educators and students, essentially bringing those two stakeholders together across universities, training providers, and other education providers too, to essentially drive student engagement, retention, and save teachers time so they can spend more teaching.
Excellent. And before we go deeper, tell me a little bit more about you. Where did you grow up, and what were your childhood influences?
Yeah, cool. So I was born and raised here in Melbourne, Australia. But looking back, growing up, and I've always been really fascinated about building and creating new things ever since I was a little kid, from the art projects to small side hustles. I was working on a aged care hardware startup in the med tech space, funnily enough, when I was about 14 years old. Basically taught me a lot about what it takes to build something new. I take that to market. And, obviously being surrounded by a lot of cool people in the industry too really helped me sort of understand who I wanted to become, especially when you're in your early teens and you have no idea what you want to do for the rest of your life. It really helped me sort of understand myself a lot better as well.
Yeah, what got you into that field? I had to write code when I was 9 because my father was an electrical engineer and he wanted me to follow in his footsteps. So I was coding on a Commodore
Yeah.
64. It's
Yeah.
writing QBasic against like my own desires. I'd rather be outside riding my bicycle. What got you in? Was this natural curiosity yourself or from your parents? How did you get inspired to do this at 14?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because I think one of the biggest things I really benefited from is, I was lucky enough to have a lot of opportunities to be able to work and build different and new things. And I landed up really enjoying that. And looking around the families around me when I was at school, friends, their parents as well, a lot of them would run their own companies and businesses, some even working and running tech startups. And I never really understood what that actually was naturally when I was, like 9 years old or whatever it was. And I was really fascinated by a lot of the global leaders at the time as well, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, et cetera, et cetera. And I had always been so passionate and engaged with what they've been doing in the space. And I've always wanted to do something on my own that could emulate that sort of impact that they've had too. And that's essentially what really drew me, I guess, into sort of this ecosystem.
What were your earlier jobs after? I'm guessing you were building something at 14, but it wasn't your job. Tell me a little bit more about some of your earlier roles.
Yeah. So one of the first ever jobs I got was actually making wraps and burgers at Schnitz. And that was very much a get money in the bank, save the cash type of job. Naturally, there wasn't really any objective outcome from that job specifically. I'd always been focused on, building something or building my next project or whatever that might be. So this job actually came after I started my own kind of startup in the aged care hardware space. And so this job was very much focused on um, getting some cash in the bank so I could work on my next project. And that was one of my sort of first ever jobs. And then I actually got a job later on at a startup at the time, now most definitely a, a very well established company called Academy X, which funnily enough is an education provider. And today is actually one of our customers.
Oh, wow.
And I had my journey. Yeah, it's actually a really serendipitous story for me, actually. So I started volunteering there because I really wanted to get out of fast food and working in fast food and hospitality. I obviously wanted to get a bit more industry experience, working in startups at a bit more of a scale, larger scale. And so I started volunteering there within their events department. So this is pre-COVID, right? So
Mhm.
my whole sort of role, I guess, volunteering there for a couple of weeks was actually just setting up the event chairs, greeting the patrons as they came in, setting up their drinks, foods, and nibbles, and coordinating all the catering and whatnot for these events. And now these events would be at their office, which is actually in the city here in Melbourne, and that would be anywhere from 60 guests to like 100 times, depending on like how big the event actually was. And 2 weeks in, I was doing this sort of daily, carrying chairs, loading them up, unpacking them, putting them back in the storage room. And I did that for a couple of weeks. And the general manager came up to me, who actually offered me the volunteering opportunity. He said, "Hey, do you want to get a job here and do it?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, what? Like do the same thing and then essentially get paid for it this time." And he was like, "Yeah, basically." And I was like, "Okay, why not?" So I did that. And actually, long story short, academics, I have them to thank for a lot of the connections, the growth that I've had as a person. So I actually started, being the campus coordinator from events to managing the campus. And I got promoted to leading the customer experience side of things for the Melbourne operations after about a year. And then COVID hit, and then I unfortunately was made redundant at that time. That said, still a fantastic experience. But along the way, after that, I then got a job at Lightspeed Commerce. I've also worked on other hospital joints as well across the board. But yeah, those are some of my earlier jobs.
Yeah. So Academy XI, for those people who don't know, tell us a little bit more about what they do.
Yeah, so Academy XI essentially runs really niche specific based courses in various fields like growth marketing, software engineering, user experience, user interface design to essentially help career changers or new entrants into the job market to essentially upskill themselves in these specific industries. So the whole kind of concept is instead of paying, a university or racking up a large HECS debt to really get a prolonged degree, the idea here is do a 12-week course or 12-month course and get hired straight after.
Yeah. I I remember speaking to Academy XI during COVID because I was in Victoria with all the lockdowns and I was going to consider teaching their product management classes. So it's a very
Wow.
small world that,
Very small world.
yes, I think it was during that time when they were cutting back their classes because of the lockdowns and they're trying to find a way to have them remote. And I ended up helping startup founders as part of Stone and Chalk's mentorship program because they could still operate remotely, but I could have been an instructor there. And maybe it's not too
Very,
late.
very cool. Very cool.
I remember reading a little bit about you being in one of the science competitions. Tell me a little bit more about this young Aussie scientist competition, the best of the best, and what it entailed.
Yeah, gosh, it's just what a decade ago now, which is actually kind of crazy to think about it. Times have really flown here. So what was that? I was 14. So just over a decade ago, actually. So I'm 25 now. But when I was 14 years old, around that, 14, 15, I, it was I was school, I went to Scotch College in Melbourne and they would put announcements on this sort of pin board in this main sort of hallway. And one of the announcements there was, "Hey, like we're looking for science students to apply for the STAV, which is the Science Talent Search Victoria Association, essentially." And the whole concept here, I believe at the time it was like submit a really cool project in the field of STEM and potentially win $200 or $300 from it and get access to, progressing your project in the field of STEM. And I was like, what does that even mean? I have no idea what's going on. And so I spoke to the teacher at the time who was championing that initiative, learned a bit more about it. And this kind of leads me to Protego, which is one of my first sort of projects, which essentially was a product to keep elderly family members safe in their own home instead of nursing homes. I mean, a large part of that story is because my great granddad actually had a fall at home. No one knew about it, had internal bleeding and landed up passing away actually a few months later. And a lot of that idea of the project was, hey, how do we minimize that strain and give family members peace of mind, knowing that their loved ones, elderly loved ones, are safe in their own home, not, paying thousands and thousands of dollars to nursing homes. And took that sort of idea, went to an arts and crafts store, built like this. I kid you not, I built this entire, I guess what you call it, a model of a house because I was trying to emulate what it would like to be in this house. And we use like RFID technology. So I landed up getting in contact with some networks in Texas Instruments who I use this RFID technology. And essentially, there would be a map of the floor, a floor plan on a computer, and it'll show you where that dot is. So you know that the elderly family member is like walking around the house, is active and out and about. So I took that as, I guess you could call it the MVP, applied for it, landed up getting in. And I believe it was like a presentation to like the committee It's quite grueling, actually. I think, just reflecting on it, I vaguely remember that it was at this like hall, a building elsewhere, and it was just like literally me in this massive hall and like these 4 or 5 committee members, and you're just presenting in front of them. It's quite scary to be a 14-year-old doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, yeah, I landed up getting that. And the next stage after that was I got accepted into the BHP Billiton Science and Engineering Awards in 2015. And so that was really cool and managed to, take my project there and, pitch it there. And if you won that, you would go to the Intel International Science and Engineering Fair in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so I landed up winning the BHP award. And in 2015, 2016, I went to the Intel ISEF comp in the US. And that was a crazy experience. So that's essentially sort of how that came about. And over the lines, like the BHP competition was actually also in partnership with CSIRO and managed to work with their team too. And build out the sort of functional working product.
Wow, that's incredible. And at 14. And I also read that you were the delegate for the G20 for a young delegate.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Oh my God. This is the craziest thing ever. I had, funnily enough, I was like probably the only 15-year-old to have LinkedIn. And one of my like, I know everyone laughs at that,
The
but
only one who
it's really
wanted
funny. My
LinkedIn.
co-founder,
The only 15-year-old who wanted LinkedIn
really
also.
funny. Yeah. My co-founder, the Huddled actually was the same. It's the same as well. He also has a LinkedIn at 14. Everyone laughs at us too because of that reason alone. But anyways, yeah. So I thought LinkedIn and one of the connections I had at Texas Instruments and BHP had sent over an application form to apply to become one of the G20 Australian delegates for the G20 Young Entrepreneurs Association. And that year, the G20 delegation was actually happening in Japan and Fukuoka. And essentially, I applied for it the day quite literally it was closing. I was sitting in a cafe. I remember this clearly actually. I was sitting in a cafe at the window and going to the application. And it was like this 30-minute, like 30 to 45-minute application process that literally the cutoff time was like within the next sort of hour. So really not much time to proofread or anything like that. I had also filmed a video and whatnot.
Wow.
And so I quickly put together this whole application that they requested, submitted it, literally completely freeballed it. Had no idea what I was doing, but I knew very well that they were looking for, my journey and, with Protego and what the science competitions that I've been doing, my entrepreneurial journey and where I want to be heading in my life. And yeah, managed to get a response back from them, I think like a week or so later and got accepted after a few interviews, got accepted into it. And then I was on a plane to Japan about a month later.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And I got to spend a day with the CTO of Pokemon Go, but that was a cool experience.
For me, the equivalent for most of the early parts of my career was trying to get on Forbes 30 under 30. This. And then the day I turned 30, I was like, that's over.
Yeah.
But I actually ended up meeting when I was working at one of the Canadian unicorns. I met someone who was recruited mainly because he was on Forbes 30 under 30. And apparently you get nominated and it's not the most objective criteria to get
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Forbes 30 under 30. But that ship has sailed and I don't think there's like a 50 under 50 for me to compete in anymore.
I would love to. I'd love to become a part of Forbes 30 under 30 at some point, but I guess I got about 5 years. So.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how did Huddled come about? You've done so many things at such an early age. How did this idea come to mind that you want to work on this problem in the market?
Yeah. It's actually a really interesting story because Huddled, not many people know this. And Huddled actually, what part is today was a result of, I would say, a couple failures, couple pivots as well before we really got to something that was actually working. And so, naturally, to mention, I love building and creating new things. I think I struggled to stay still since like my sort of early teens. And I, being the only person on LinkedIn at the time when I was 14,
Who are you
15,
connected to?
I was literally connected to everyone at BHP and
Yeah.
I was working with UNSW and whatnot, CFA, which is really cool. It's pretty wild. And so I wanted to be able to work with other sort of young people as well in my circle. And so an early version of Huddled actually was like a LinkedIn for Gen Z. You could kind of call it almost like the way YC kind of said is like a type it idea. That's probably what it was and how it started. And so effectively, I wanted this platform where it's like, cool, like LinkedIn's for the suit and tie people. This is essentially what my mindset was back then. It's very different now, but back then I was like, oh, LinkedIn's for suit and ties. It's really corporatized. I want something that's like really dumbed down. It's super Gen Z. It's really hip and cool. It sounded like a great idea in my head at the time. And yeah, literally, yeah, remember that like money that I sort of saved, like with sheds and what and my other jobs too. I actually sort of took that and some other jobs as well. And I took that money and I put it into sort of building this app. And so I had like a freelancer that I'm like found online somewhere. And so I like created this MVP of it. Granted, in hindsight, the way I went about sort of building this MVP was like everything you probably shouldn't do, I did.
Mm,
I didn't learn what my users wanted, didn't like build exactly what they cared about, build what I cared about.
yeah.
And, it's literally the worst way to go about it, right? And I'm openly admit I've learned a lot from it since then. And yeah, that's how it started. And then launched it. And the way we launched it was actually I reached out to technically every single student group that it like existed on Facebook back when Gen Zers actually used Facebook.
Yeah.
And I literally spammed it with, hey, launch this new app, et cetera, et cetera. And then, yeah, we got some like people on the wait list and whatnot. Had like 300 people on the wait list. And like week one that we launched, I could easily say that 5 of them joined and 4 of them my friends. Like, it is pretty drastic. It was actually terrible. And then I was like, oh, I really want to figure this out. I really want this like work out. And then, tweaked it a bit, try to change the formatting of the way the UX of it kind of rigid because I really thought that if you change the way a product looks, you can solve all your problems and throw some more money at it because
Oh yeah.
clearly that's what's solving problems, right? And so we this time, right? I was like, oh, okay, cool. That didn't work. And I was like, cool, I'll put some money and like pay that. It's like, surely money will also solve my problems. And so it's like, cool, like users kept joining in, verged 1,000 monthly actives. And that lasted for all of like maybe 3 months. And then literally like died after that. But the silver lining is here that I actually met my co-founder Archer on the platform. I had no idea
Oh,
that
wow.
he was even at the same uni as I was. He was like literally the only engaged user on the platform and actively like doing everything, playing around with it. And we started chatting on the platform. And then
That you built.
yeah, yeah. So it went back then for there's one success story, and that I'm glad that it was between my co-founder and I now co-founder, and yeah, and we you know started we met up, and I was like, hey, like this isn't working, man. Like we got to figure something else to do, and we later on actually we went on. Ironically, everyone laughs at this, but ironically, we went on LinkedIn and found my CTO and co-founder Davin, and then we got together and we were like, this ain't working. We need to change it up. And then Davin was at a like hackathon type thing at his uni. And the whole title of that event was how can we really improve student engagement through a centralized communication platform? And we are like, oh my God, this is where we need to pivot into. And we were like, we could probably just tweak what we have in our product, make it enterprise specific, so like B2B, where only like businesses or these universities can sign up their cohorts and to the platform. And that's how we pivoted into what Huddled is today.
Yeah. I'm on before we continue, I am looking for my next CTO. Do you recommend looking on LinkedIn, or what would you do differently today if you were looking for a CTO in Australia for a
Yeah.
startup?
I think what's really funny, probably something I didn't mention is when I reached out to Devin, he thought I was scamming him because like he was like fresh in uni and he was like, who the hell is messaging me to become a CTO? Like, I'm just trying to do my degree and get by and, and whatnot. And so, obviously we cleared the air. clearly realized that I wasn't scamming it. But I think LinkedIn's super valuable to find like, your sort of the right circle. But I think what I would do differently is I guess in my story, it doesn't make sense for me to do anything differently because I feel like everything happened in the way it's supposed to be. I'm a firm believer in that everything happens for a reason. But I can appreciate that not everyone who finds their next CTO on LinkedIn, it lands up being a great story either. And so I think some of the best ways to, match yourself with the right co-founder is, or CTO rather, CTO or co-founder is, actually spend time with them. So, I caught up for coffees and whatnot with both Archer and Davin separately as well. And we also hung out together too to make sure that us three could work together as a team, as a collective. I guess if it's just two co-founders, and only the two of you would actually need to do something. But
Yeah.
I think it's really important to understand that you can actually get along with this person as a friend. Because if you're going to be building something in the trenches for the next 10 years, you need to be able to argue healthy arguments, healthy
Yeah.
debates. We like to call them healthy debates rather than just arguments, but being able to discuss things at scale and work with them, but also be like a supportive friend too. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I follow that same advice. I believe in that. And I think it's really good that you chose someone that had similar behaviors as you built. It was in a way a
Yeah.
filtering device. Like you built a platform where someone else saw the value. So it was a good way to find that person and to get along with them. For me, my co-founder is someone that I've known for 9 years and we've worked together for a long time. And I think you're correct on, you're basically in a new serious relationship with a child because you need to now raise this child together and you'll have different views and you have to be able to reconcile your differences to continue raising it and not walk away from it. And so I think that's really good advice, is to get to know these people.
Yeah.
Something I heard from one of the MD of Sprint Ventures is about like meeting these people. And I think her name is Cody Simpson, the one that's on YouTube. She talks about she never makes a deal with anyone she doesn't know for a year. You need to get to know people before you're working with them every day or you trust them with a large piece of your business. So I will remember that for when I'm looking now that I'm looking for my CTO. So you found your business partner, you pivoted, and you basically found a really good shortcut to doing your research because you went to a space and you're like, there's a problem here. They're telling us there's a problem. Why don't we go fix this one? So,
Yeah, basically.
and then you had an existing product that you're like, we can just tweak this. We don't have to start from scratch. Tell me what happened next after the changes. How did you relaunch? What was it like when you relaunched?
Yeah. So the beauty of what we sort of had at the time is both Archer and Davin. So I was on RMIT, Archer is at RMIT, and Davin was at Swimit. And so we had access to sort of the network of people that were there and sort of the database of the people that we could potentially even work with or reach out to. And so we effectively cooked up a Figma prototype that was so robust. Like you would honestly use it and think it was the real thing. And we made it so granular to every single text input, button, icon, whatever it might be. And so we booked, like 10 to 15 meetings every single week with teachers, professional staff to really understand how universities and educational institutions actually function from a decision-making point of view, as well as
Yeah.
a usage point.
Yeah.
We started learning that like the institution, like the university, for example, they obviously the professional staff members make the decisions there, but they're not the users. The users are actually the teachers and the students of the product. And so we then realized, okay, the product needs to be attractive enough for the teachers and the students, but also attractive to the decision makers, the professional staff members of the institution. So we have to be able to provide value to three separate and very different types of personas and stakeholders. And so during these meetings, we started learning about what they're currently doing, what they're currently using, where it's faulting, where it's not working, and started learning a lot about, how learning management systems, their communication tools that exist aren't very robust, and the communication and collaboration that students and teachers need. And so that's why, public social media comes into the picture to replace them. But then the problems of public social media is that you're sharing private information. There's no standardization. You're frantically looking for all your chats for every single assignment that you're doing. They get lost, files, everything gets lost. And so essentially it's like kind of fitting a square peg in a round hole. And so we were like, okay, cool. So students have a problem with dealing with so many different apps for their kind of group assignments. Teachers don't really want additional workload added to their plate. And professional staff just want to make sure that if they buy a new software or tool, that it adds value to them from an engagement, retention, and marketing point of view. And so, yeah, we took all these insights and we just literally iterated on Figma and would go back to these people that we met and tell them, hey, now try this out. What do you think? And then we spent a good 6 months doing that. At the end of 6 months, we started writing the sort of the first lines of code. During that time, we found our first ever champion, which is a course director at RMIT. And they had a big problem with group assignments. And students hated it. They're having to juggle multiple different social apps, and the teacher hated it too, because what would happen is that students would use it, they'd have a lot of group conflict, then they would have to send like mountains of screenshots by email to the teacher to review, just find out who's at fault. So adding more time and workload to the teacher. So the teacher wanted that removed. And so Huddled actually started almost at this point as a group assignment chat. So the problem that we solved was the chaos of group assignments to begin with.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, now since then, we've obviously scaled up a lot more than that. And now we sort of empower the entirety of learning and teaching and academic communication.
Yeah. I remember, so it was a long time ago, so more than 1 decade, which ages me so much.
Yeah.
When we had to do group assignments, and there's so many group assignments in business school, I think it's a way to prepare you for the workforce. You're going to be working with a
Yeah.
whole bunch of other people. And there's always a social loafer, like someone who doesn't do their job,
Yeah.
who
It's
doesn't
always
do their
best.
part. And it's so frustrating. And then most of the conversations were like, these people are dragging their feet or doing poor quality work. And then
Yeah.
it's a lot of hearsay because you can't, like you said, you can't replay this to the professor. And then it just sounds like kids fighting and not much comes of it. So tell me a little bit more about the solution where you talk about the moderation. How does it work and how does it solve this problem?
Yeah. So when we were, going through our customer sort of discovery phase and then actively sort of rolling out to our first few providers that use the platform, we started getting feedback that, hey, I don't want to spend more time and money trying to like moderate this platform. So instead of the platform really solving the need, which it kind of was, but it was actually creating a burden. And the way we solved that was like, okay, cool. Like we obviously want to retain these customers. We obviously want to deliver value. And so we built out a way using AI to do semantic and contextual analysis on, I would say, practically every single kind of text input in the platform. So essentially where a user can enter free text. And so effectively what that meant was they no longer needed to hire someone or have someone pay them to manually moderate the space because our AI would actually just block things like sexual harassment, abuse, bullying, racism, etc., at scale, wherever it might occur, as well as hate speech, wherever it might occur. So what landed up happening was that all of a sudden it wasn't like, oh, Huddled is solving a really cool engagement problem for us, but now it's oh, we don't even need to worry about it being safe or not because it is and inclusive. And so that's essentially how that came about.
Yeah, excellent. And who are some of your first customers and pilots where you were able to see this work in production with in larger scale than your test? Who were some of your earlier customers?
Yeah. So a couple of them were like academics, which I mentioned before, and
Mhm.
Leo Carson Center for Law, which is actually a legal focused registered training organization. And so just to name a few. And so they were one of the first ever users or customers of Huddle. And actually for academics, they switched from Slack to us. And
Mhm.
that's actually what most of our customers do. And then from Leo Carson Center for Law, they were using Microsoft Teams and they were using their discussion boards and they switched from them, those tools to us. And what we saw was that the moderation was giving them peace of mind. And I think that was a real eye opener for us. And what we're really selling here, not from a moderation standpoint, isn't the fact that we can make it safe for everyone. Cool. That's like obviously a positive, but it's actually the peace of mind of the liabilities that the institutions no longer needed to worry about
Mm.
because obviously
Yeah.
they have a duty of care
Yeah.
to fulfill for their learners. And if a learner uses another learner, the student support teams and the experience teams need to get involved, which costs money. And so effectively now it's oh my God, I can spend more time focusing on my bigger projects rather than dealing with group conflict that could have easily been avoided. And so that's effectively what we've seen with our early adopters and obviously now at scale.
So when I hear about this, I wish I had this in the workplace. I mean, I've experienced aggressive colleagues before, some mild bullying. And if this was integrated with my Teams or Slack or in shared documents, I think it would help minimize toxic environments that we avoid, which like toxic environments are existent, whether it's a like highly successful company or a like non-successful company. So in fact, I think when you're in a fast growing company, people are driven by certain incentives and behaviors, and they're stressed that they may not regulate their own emotions very well. And having
Mm.
solutions like this would be so beneficial for retention. I think this would be so interesting. Where do you see the next stages of applying? I mean, even in dating tools, like there's still like racism in dating
Yeah.
chats. And
Yeah.
although
Obviously.
there should be
Yeah.
like a duty of care from the platform to protect
Yeah.
the users of it, but there's not still. You can still have harassment and bullying on those platforms. Where do you see the next applications of solutions like this from Huddle? Like, where do you want to grow this into?
Yeah. I think we found a really good niche with education institutions, unis, training providers, RTOs, and specifically in like learning and teaching. So our sort of philosophy is that if we can connect people in the ecosystems we already know that they exist in, then it'll be quite easy or straightforward to kind of connect them in other ecosystems too. So what I mean by that is in learning and teaching, it's very straightforward. Teachers are teaching a specific unit, students are studying that specific unit. That's a very easy connection to make because they're already grouped in that community or that ecosystem per se. After that, what we want to do is actually roll out Huddled into very social and niche specific spaces too. So like club societies, events, etc. Eventually, then we want to roll out into alumni, and then we want to roll into hiring. So then selling our product to businesses who can hire grads, undergrads, which is great for the institution to measure employability outcomes and employability rates and salary expectations because they'll all market that in their annual reports, right? To say, hey, if you do this degree with us, you're guaranteed to get a minimum $75,000 salary and a role 12 months after or 6 months after you graduate or something like that. And so effectively, what I'm saying here is that I want Huddle to become sort of the entirety of the student lifecycle. So we want to support that entire ecosystem and obviously all the stakeholders involved at every single step of the way too. And so that's essentially where we see Huddle going in the long run. And then I guess looking sort of 10-year plan, like long term, and it's more of a passing thought than anything. It could, funnily enough, go back to our roots too and kind of replace the subsection of LinkedIn for Gen Z if we're able.
You haven't let it go yet.
If
You're like, when I have more time, I'll come back to this.
yeah, it's if we can get every single student on our platform and they're verified by businesses and getting hired by businesses, then like isn't the next obvious step just to build some sort of network effect at scale? I don't know. That's just a passing thought. But right now, yes, focusing on the student life cycle is where our strategy plan is aligned.
I think by the time you come circle back to LinkedIn for Gen Zs in a different stage in their career, and
Probably.
there's a new generation that you need to
Probably.
cater for their
Yeah.
behaviors. I think that's incredible.
Probably.
I think
Yeah.
that's incredible. So one thing I'm interested in where you're doing the moderation, you are also going through, yeah, your models are going through a lot of data because it needs to like figure out sentiment and all these other things to be able to censor. What insights do you provide the institutions on the overall performance and what kind of what kind of view do they get to see?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So the moderations, the AI moderation that we have is a user specific flag. So what I mean by that is, let's just say I I'm sending something that's deemed as hate speech towards you and we're in a group together. I would get a pop up the moment I hit enter or send on my keyboard. The message actually won't send. It'll quickly, check what it is, and then it'll actually show you a pop up saying, "Hey, this message has been blocked because of XYZ," which means that you'll actually never receive it. So that's the first thing. The professional staff or the administrators of the workspace, little workspace they have, they don't right now, they don't see the number of reports that come through, like through AI, just because AI is just meant to handle it already. So they don't get insight into that. But what they do see is if I go out of my way to actually file a log a report, because you can do that in Huddle manually, they'll see that within their reporting dashboard, which is obviously that means it's quite severe if someone has actually done that. For their side of, group interactions, engagement, the data is all anonymized and owned by them. So us as a company, we only facilitate it through our proprietary analytics dashboard. They just get to control it and view it. So what that means is we don't own that data, but the institution that we work with does, and they get to see anonymized cohort data. So instead of seeing like Drew engaged this much and Ray engaged this much, they say, no, you've got 1,000 students in your Huddle workspace and large number of teachers. Did you know that they've spent 10 minutes on average every single day this week on the platform? They've sent on average blah number of messages. So it's very cohort level data because institutions don't really need student specific or staff specific data to make data driven decisions. Data driven decisions have to be made at scale at a cohort level. That's because the way they function. And so that's essentially the analytics that they get to see at scale. And then they can obviously break down that analytics per group as well to see which groups are engaged, which groups aren't engaged, or of course, again, at an anonymized cohort level. So not user specific, but very much high level. So yeah.
My naive self always thought that building products for education institutions would be a long sales process that I never
Yeah.
wanted to join. What has your experience been like getting into the space with your product?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. I was having a conversation with someone else about this before, and long sales cycles in education or government education, inherently these industries have been known as a space to have really long sales cycles. But I actually kind of disagree with this kind of notion because I think if you're building something that's genuinely solving a really burning customer need or problem that should have been solved yesterday, then that's something that's worth building and they're ready to buy. Um, for me and for us, when we seen it naturally, getting our first customer took a while, right? We had no case studies, we had literally no data. All we had was just like surveys that we ran with students and teachers, and that showed us that there was a strong need. And naturally, getting a first customer is always the hardest. But now what we're seeing is that, we've got a number of customers that use this already. We've gotten a lot of data points. That, people are actively using our platform, actually talking about us online as well. We actually rank first in SEO too, which is really cool in our search results. And so we see now, we get a combination of people wanting to sign up to us directly. They reach out to us, or we reach out to them. And so now the sales cycle, yeah, on average, typically it is a longer like a sales cycle, but it's no different to, I would say, a standard B2B sales cycle, where we take on average maybe 4+ months to close an enterprise client. But the way we try to navigate that as well is, we have a freemium option so people can actually try out product, see the value first before they commit. And we can work with them to make sure that our product aligns with their strategic plan too. And then we also nail down on our ICP as well. So we focus on a very specific type of educational institution to make sure that the value that they're getting is, and the value our product is building towards, is unanimous across the board. So we're doing sort of one thing and doing one thing really well, and not 10 things and doing a terrible thing of all of them.
Sometimes I
Yeah.
feel like I'm the one doing 10 things pretty mediocrely, but I
Yeah.
think we're also our harshest critic.
I agree.
What are your lessons for the next generation of ed tech founders who are inspired by your story? What are things that you wished someone else told you?
Yeah. This is actually the one, because I think the first thing I wish someone told me is that B2B, and I've used this very lightly, but B2B doesn't exist, B2H does. And what that is like business to human. At the end of the day, you're selling to a person. You're not selling to a business. And so I wish I knew that earlier on, because everything that we had done in the early days was tailored towards the business, the customer. But it's actually really not. It's tailored towards a person inside that organization. I mean, we'd sell to a department sometimes that has like 500 staff, but we're still selling to one person out of 500 who makes a call. And so effectively, that's probably the biggest thing. The second thing I would say is don't get caught up in, this whole sort of notion of, oh, the sales cycles are really long and single spirits and worth it. Like, I I don't agree with that because the thing is, there are a number of other ed tech companies that you could easily see, whether it's, adjacent to Huddled or and a completely different new ed tech company that you're creating, and you're seeing competitors, that have been able to sell to institutions. The whole concept is that they've actually been able to sell to institutions. And if they can do it, you can do it too. And that's the way I look at it. And I would say spend enough time in understanding what they currently are doing to solve the problem, because a lot of times in enterprise sales, you get objections because people are very much used to what they already use, which is natural. That makes sense. Sometimes, the people are very resistant or hesitant to change. But essentially, if you understand enough what they're currently using, you'll be able to figure out a way to get them to switch as long as you can demonstrate why your product is 10x more valuable than what they're already trying to do, and how it's going to give them some sort of benefit. And that's why it brings me back to the first point of, it's B2H. You're selling to a human. They're people at the end of the day. So you need to make sure that you're working with them, not for them or against them.
I agree with that. When I worked in banking and especially selling payment services, I wasn't selling the best product and I wasn't selling the cheapest product, but it's about the relationships that you have with the people and whether they enjoy interacting with you. And it's more beneficial to work with you than with someone else. And sometimes it's like the support that you
Absolutely.
give them. It's sometimes the rapport that you have with them. But I used to think going in that it's the feature set and the price. Like for me, probably because of being neural atypical, I focus on like the best price with the most features that I like.
Yeah.
But I realized in enterprise sales, in mid-tier sales, even in small, medium-sized businesses like startups, sometimes it's not having enough time and it's someone they can trust. And like, it's good enough. I realize not everyone goes through the same rigor as I
Yeah.
do in
Yeah.
decision making, where I use deep search over 100 sources to figure out what is the best ISP to solve my current 5G problem. They
Yeah.
probably just, hey, and they just ask their friend what they're using and then they just sign up for it and ask them, does it work for you? Sounds good. And that's my next question is having this background in STEM, scientific rigor, but then this entrepreneurial agility. How do you balance those two things? Because one drives this statistical excellence and the other one drives this, like, in some ways, fake it till you make it, but held together MVP. It's basic. It has a lot of imperfections, but it's good enough to ship. How do you balance this in your life at Huddle?
Yeah. I think now, like today, I would say that my passion for STEM is not as strong as what it used to be. And that's just because when I got into the world of tech and tech startups, I was just more excited by that. And I think it's really important to follow what makes you happy and excited, because otherwise you're just not going to do a good job of it. And so balancing that today, it's very much I focus on sort of doing one thing. And so growing and building Huddle to what it is today, we started in a small class and now we operate with educational providers across 5 countries. And it's been definitely a crazy journey. I think maybe one day I'll go back to my STEM roots, but I think right now, Huddle is definitely what's driving me. I feel so passionate about, and I know that the impact that we're going to have is so much bigger than just myself, my co-founders, and my team. So yeah.
Excellent. I have one more question, and that's the one I wrap up with is for the listeners who want to learn more about your journey and the company and you, what is the best way to connect with you and your company?
Yeah. So definitely, yeah, I've been connecting on LinkedIn, and I share a lot of things about our journey and Huddled and some of the new customers that are using our product as well. Then, of course, if you're an educational provider, an institution, you can actually just check out our website as well and learn a bit more about what we're doing. And I'll be happy to chat through about the impact that, we feel like we can bring to the wider student and teacher ecosystem. So yeah,
Excellent. I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for today.
really appreciate you having me. Thank you so much, Ray.